Today, I have found the literal hardest mod ever made. In this mod, pole vaulters jump twice the distance and duplicate, newspaper zombies fire literal lasers, and 12 times more zombies spawn than usual. Are these levels even possible, and how ridiculous will this get? I present to you, Plants vs. Zombies, Reality Twisted Edition. The first level is supposed to be a tutorial, but even that took me multiple tries. You can see that pea shooter now costs 150 sun, but I also started with a lot more sun than usual. The mod's main gimmick is the click and hold mechanic, where holding down left click on certain plants activates their special ability. For pea shooters, they shoot a big pea, but it costs us 50 sun every time we use it. But in this mod, 12 times more zombies spawn, and you can already tell why this was impossible to defend using just pea shooters. Even spamming the zombies with big peas and constantly planting new pea shooters didn't even put a dent into this massive horde. Now normally the lawnmower should kill all the zombies, but the flag zombie, which now moves 10 times faster, has something to say about that. What? Yup. Lawnmowers don't even kill zombies anymore, as they only do a set amount of damage. I tried again, this time focusing my big peas on the flag zombie, but even then, I was unable to stop it from killing us. It took me several more attempts, but I eventually discovered pea shooter's new burst ability, which gives them a temporary attack speed bonus when planted in a lane with fewer than 2 pea shooters. By planting pea shooters in the very front, I can keep getting new pea shooters when there's only one other pea shooter in the lane by letting the previous one die. Having this extra burst squeezes in just enough damage against the flag zombie, allowing the lawnmower to finish the job. This is just a tutorial, so imagine how hard the upcoming levels will be. One of the most significant changes is that each sun is now worth 50 instead of 25 like in PvZ 2, so planting a lot of sunflowers is more crucial than ever. Another change is the introduction of plant variants, where holding down left click on certain plants allows us to change their variant. The sunflower has 2 variants apart from its default mode. This one I'll call the bloodflower, sacrifices itself in exchange for a burst of 400 sun, but damages all plants on the lawn. There are also zombie variants, which are veteran versions of regular zombies with new and powerful abilities that occasionally spawn. The thorn zombie is a variant of the basic zombie, which simply damages the plant that hurts it. But that's no problem for the doomflower, which produces doom suns that do 500 damage to every zombie on the lawn. It may seem overpowered on first glance, but the catch is that each Doom Sun also takes away 200 sun, and you also cannot switch back to a regular sunflower after changing it to a Doomflower. But this level was a breeze since we were still in the tutorial, and here's the new Bomber Flag Zombie variant, which explodes plants around itself every time it kills something. Thankfully, I had to force that to spam big piece against it, but boy is that one hell of a dangerous zombie we'll have to encounter often. Now, you're probably wondering why we can't just spam Doomflowers to beat every level. Well, the variant of Conehead zombies, the Toxic Conehead, is the main problem with that. When Toxic Coneheads die, they drop a poison bottle on the ground, which, after a few seconds, will start poisoning all plants on the lawn. The only way to stop this is to plant something on top of the poison bottle, which sacrifices the plant. And you can see if you just spam Doomflowers, you'll kill the zombies way too quickly and end up with a bunch of poison bottles that you can't deal with, and you'd basically wipe out your own defense. I lucked out that I had Cherry Bomb off cooldown to kill the flag zombie at the end, which actually explodes twice now, but oh boy, we're just now finishing the tutorial. And now is when things start to get real, because we now have to deal with 5 lanes of zombies. I can only get 3 sunflowers before the zombies even come, and they come in all 5 lanes at once. So I just relied on Doomflowers for most of my damage, given they're the easiest solution. But using them in the early game cost us a lot of sun, and it meant I couldn't get enough sun to plant sacrificial plants against the poison bottles. By the time I realized, it was already too late, and there was no way to salvage the defense. I also found out that if you don't have at least 200 sun, the Doom Sun from Doomflowers will still take away their sun, but it won't damage the zombies. Well, great. I somehow survived until the final wave by just sacrificing lawnmowers, but right as I was about to place a Cherry Bomb, a Doomflower drained all my sun and actually made me lose to the Bomber Flag Zombie. It's a double-edged sword that can be amazing or the worst thing possible. So, ironically, we have to get through the early game using the weaker plants like pea shooters and walnuts to save up enough sun for Doomflowers later. And speak of walnut, you may have noticed it glowing yellow, which is its new ability that gives it temporary invincibility every time it's bitten 6 times. The coolest part of it is that holding down left click makes it strike the first enemy in its lane. With the help of pea shooters and walnuts in the early game, I got my Doomflowers later when I had better sun production. And now, I can counter the poison bottles without getting overwhelmed. It's starting to get a little bit trickier, but the level is still not that hard to beat. Now, that's the first non-tutorial level out of the way. Now, I'm skipping over 1-5 since it was pretty straightforward, but oh boy, the new pole vaulting zombies? Cue the boss music. Let's start with the fact that pole vaulters can now spawn on the first wave of the level. There's not even time to prepare for them and set up a proper defense. Hence, using blood flowers to produce enough stun for pea shooters and bursting them down with big peas is the only way to deal with them for now, which thankfully is enough against the regular pole vaulters. But the Giga Pole Vaulter, my god, it moves 2.5 times faster, has 4 times more health, and when it jumps 2.5 tiles and kills all plants in a 3x3 area and survives a lawnmower. I can't make this up, I literally lost 2 waves in. The Giga Pole Vaulters have so much health, it's basically impossible to defend with pea shooters. I literally spammed big peas as much as possible, but that didn't even get through half its health. I mean, killing half my defense is enough of a punishment already, but it also survives a lawnmower. Like, are you serious right now? The dumbest part is that they can spawn the first wave, so the level is extremely RNG based. Like, how am I supposed to defend Giga Pole Vaulters on the first wave if Cherry Bomb is still recharging, and we don't even have the sun to fire extra big peas from our pea shooters? Is this just straight up impossible? Now, thankfully, that doesn't happen in most runs, so I was able to make use of Potato Mine to defend the early game still. Though it now costs a 75 stun, they pull in zombies from adjacent lanes upon arming. Aside from that, they now also detonate every column in front of themselves, which is a pretty insane buff if you ask me. But with their slow cooldown, it ain't gonna help against pole vaulters, so we need a reliable way to defend them. I tried slowing them down by proccing their jump, but they spawned an additional small pole vaulter after jumping, which just makes the situation even worse. These small pole vaulters have even more health than a Buckethead in vanilla. Like, this is just so stupid. How am I supposed to defend if even constant big pea spam won't do damage fast enough? It cost us a lawnmower, but at least we're alive. That was only for one lane of pole vaulters. Now, try to deal with 3 pole vaulters in 3 separate lanes at once. Yeah, I had to sacrifice my lawnmowers to defend them since I wanted to save my defense for the long run. But lo and behold, the small regular pole vaulters also have enough health to survive a lawnmower, so that's game over. What can you even do to make a positive trade against pole vaulters? So I thought about using an existing zombie to detonate a potato mine to counter pole vaulters that are behind them. But that also didn't work because the pole vaulters somehow had a 6th sense of jumping into the air before the instantaneous explosion happened. In fact, it just made me lose even faster by making them jump earlier and straight into the house. And if I use Doom Flowers, it's all but guaranteed that one of the Doom Flowers would just trigger the 50% rule, and I would end up having no way to defend the Giga Pole Vaulters since they only generate Doom Suns once every 25 seconds. I can't even Cherry Bomb myself out of the situation because its cooldown is too long to be any kind of reliable counter against Giga Pole Vaulters. Even the Walnut Strike ability can't save us, since it doesn't do enough damage against Giga Pole Vaulters to kill them. You tell me how I'm supposed to counter pole vaulters that have the health of a Buckethead, duplicates, explodes, jumps further, and moves faster. Oh, and did I mention that you can't even use the shovel to stall for time because it now has a 1-second cooldown? I can't even save my plants on the other lanes even if I do sacrifice my lawnmowers against the pole vaulters. It's as if the modder rigged the game so every plant and game mechanic, even the shovel, was designed to make us lose to Giga Pole Vaulters. With only pea shooters and no other attacking plants, this one flag level is one of the most ridiculous levels I've ever played. I wasn't kidding with the video title, as this one flag level took me over 100 attempts to beat. I spent over 4 hours on just this level, where I tried every strategy, every lineup possible, and I wasn't even close to winning. Truly, this is one of, if not the most insane and unhinged Plants vs. Zombies mods ever made. I eventually beat the level, which required a combination of strategy and luck. The first main difference was placing my sunflowers in a 2x2 pattern rather than column by column, since they actually produce more sun the more sunflowers are nearby. But more important is using a walnut to stall the zombies in front of our potato mine. I found that using it to maximize potato mine value is the best use case in this level, since it saves sun against toxic coneheads. They don't drop their poison bottle if they die to an explosive. Now came the series of fortunate events that enabled me to win the game. The next wave had 4 toxic coneheads, which should have been absolutely terrible for us, but they all spawned in the top 3 lanes. And that's really good because the next wave's Giga Pole Vaulter ended up spawning in lane 2. So one cherry bomb killed them all and prevented all the poison bottles. Now, I did some pea shooter micromanagement and dealt with the pole vaulters and also got up a Doom Flower, but my Doom Sun just so happened to produce right as the wave was spawning, damaging the incoming Giga Pole Vaulter. I got a second Doomflower, which I somehow also got a well-timed Doomstun to do the remaining damage needed to the Giga Pole Vaulter and its child, while also damaging the next Giga Pole Vaulter in lane 1, which I cleaned up with the Pea-Shooter. It somehow got even better than that, because it was looking like I couldn't defend this Giga Pole Vaulter in lane 4, and I was going to lose since the Lawnmower doesn't do enough damage to kill it. But another well-timed Doomstun from our first Doomflower saves the day. 2 more Giga Pole Vaulters spawn. I killed the one in lane 2 with a Cherry Bomb, and I get a 4th well-timed Doomstun just in time before the Doomflowers got destroyed to damage the lane 5 Giga Pole Vaulter so that it can die to a Lawnmower. Through all that, I somehow survived to see the final wave. But now that I didn't have a Cherry Bomb for the final wave's Flag Zombie, I quickly got a Doomflower in lane 4, and I spammed everything I could to stall the Flag Zombie out. And by a miracle, I got a Doomstun right as I was about to lose, and I managed to kill everything to beat the level. I don't even know what I can say, other than that was an absolutely crazy win. However, if you thought that was ridiculous enough already, the next level is essentially the same thing, but with 2 flags and now featuring Snow Pea. That's not necessarily bad news, since Snow Peas are massively buffed in this mod, now firing an Icicle that splits into piercing Snow Peas in 4 directions. This insane damage buff is enough for Snow Peas to 2-shot basic zombies, while also slowing down groups of zombies all across the lawn. But beating the level is not as simple as spamming Snow Peas, because the Thorn Zombie has a unique interaction where it damages plants around itself when hurt by the piercing Snow Peas, which can actually kill our Cherry Bombs. And since Snow Peas on their own are still not enough to take out Giga Pole Vaulters, the run was basically over as soon as our Cherry Bomb got eviscerated. Live by the Snow Pea, die by the Snow Pea. And thankfully, we won't have that problem too often since Cherry Bomb isn't our only answer to Giga Pole Vaulters anymore, as the Snow Pea paired with a Pea-Shooter burst and 2 Big Peas is enough damage to kill them. But if you thought Big Peas were going to get us an easy win, then you might not have considered that you can't remove poison bottles if you're holding down left click on the Pea-Shooter, which makes this way of killing Giga Pole Vaulters completely unviable later on. And since this is a 2-flag level, our problem with Toxic Coneheads only gets worse. Giga Pole Vaulters aren't killing us anymore since we have Doomflowers, but I can't deal with this many poison bottles at once. The fact that the Doomflowers are killing the zombies so quickly is actually killing us, since all my plans are on cooldown and I just can't sacrifice anything to remove the poison bottles. All is lost, and now we have a dilemma. Do we use Doomflowers and die to Toxic Coneheads, or not use Doomflowers and die to Giga Pole Vaulters? Well, I tried the half measure, which is using only 1 Doomflower, but the problem is that 1 Doomstun isn't strong enough to take out the Giga Pole Vaulters, so we end up having to spend extra on them anyway. We encounter the same issue as before, where we have to hold left click on Pea-Shooters to get Big Peas, so we end up not removing the poison bottles since I'm trying to not die to Giga Pole Vaulters first, but that means my defense will die to poison anyway, so yeah, this isn't the solution. So why not spam Snow Peas and rely on their splash damage to take care of everything? Well, that's what I tried, but without the extra single target DPS from Pea-Shooter's burst, it's just not enough to counter Giga Pole Vaulters reliably. If I lose any part of the defense, I get instantly cooked, since I need to remove the poison bottles first, leaving no plans for me to rebuild in the long run. That's if I even have enough plans to remove the poison bottles in the first place. And forget about using Potato Mine to minimize the poison bottles from Toxic Coneheads, because it just pulls in Pole Vaulters and makes them harder to kill when they hide between a thicker crowd of zombies. If anything, that was just self-sabotage, because it prevented me from shooting them down with Pea-Shooters, so that Potato Mine lost me the game. Now, we have one last hope remaining, spamming Snow Peas behind our Sunflowers so that when Giga Pole Vaulters get close, we can dig up our plants in the front to create enough space to kill them through sheer damage. However, that leads us right back to where we were, since they do splash damage. To kill the Toxic Coneheads too quickly, then there are too many poison bottles, and my plants are all on cooldown, so I can't remove them fast enough. No matter what I do, it just seems like the defense just gets destroyed one way or another. It's just apparent to me there's no good way to strike a balance between too little or too much damage. And since Doomflowers only make the situation worse for us by killing all the Toxic Conehead zombies at once, even Infinite Sun can't save us from the poison bottles, since everything we place just gets instantly poisoned. This level is undoubtedly even tougher than what we just went through in the level prior, and not even good RNG can seemingly save us this time around. What can we possibly do to beat this monstrosity? I ended up spending over 8 hours on this one level alone, twice what I spent on level 1-6. Over 100 attempts of trial and error of placing Snow Peas in different positions to try to balance between too much or too little damage every time. The recording was so long that even my editing software crashed when I attempted to render and compile these clips together. This level, my friends, is what the most ridiculous PvZ mod ever made looks like. And I'm not proud of it, but I won through just sheer trial and error to find the defense that would just hold off the Giga Pole Vaulters and kill Toxic Coneheads not too quickly, which is literally 3 columns of Snow Peas in every lane except lane 4. How else was I going to find out this was how much defense I should have gotten? I didn't even play that well because I didn't look at lane 1 and accidentally let all my snow peas get poisoned. But it didn't matter because I made it far enough that I could just use Doomflowers to push the last couple of waves by sacrificing Lawnmowers. And that's the level done because Lawnmowers do more damage later on in the level that allows them to one-shot Giga Pole Vaulters. Now that I've unlocked the 7th plant, I can finally start choosing my seeds going forth. At first glance, Buckethead Zombies seem completely unchanged from vanilla. What is different about the Buckethead Zombies, you ask? Yup, Buckethead Zombies now become enraged when they lose their Buckethead, moving and doing damage 8 times faster. So, lesson learned, one-shot them with Chomper. Wait, they don't need to chew anymore? Well, yes and no. The difference is that Chompers can now eat up to 5 zombies in quick succession before needing to digest them, which is a massive quintuple buff for vanilla. Because of how strong they are, I was able to do the entire level up to the final wave with just Chompers. But what threw me off was that Buckethead Zombies now don't die to Cherry Bombs. Damaged out while they still have a Buckethead don't pass on to the zombie itself, so in practical terms, they have a one-time protection against any lethal hit, which makes them survive a Lawnmower unless we've already damaged them in their enraged form. On top of that, they're also immune to any slowdowns while enraged, so I had to use a Walnut in lane 1, but it just meant I couldn't defend lane 4 instead, so I actually lost because of these unforeseen interactions. And now I know not to use Cherry Bomb against Buckethead Zombies. Countering them was as easy as 1, 2, 3. Just a column of Chompers will be enough against the Bucketheads, and a column of Snow Peas will kill any of the basic and Conehead Zombies to ensure we don't waste our Chompers on them. And now that's finally enough for us to finish off this level. Like Chompers, Repeaters also got a massive buff, now shooting 4 Ps per burst. On top of that, Repeaters shoot big Ps every 6th shot, which is essentially a quadruple buff to the original Repeater in the long run. But if you don't need that insane damage output, you can switch the Repeater to a Green Shadow, which makes them fire small Ps that do less damage but knock back zombies. This makes them the best counter against Giga Pole Vaulters, since it won't have the same problem Snow Peas had of killing the Toxic Coneheads too quickly. This combo between Green Shadows, Snow Peas, and Chompers made us unstoppable in the mid to late game, and though we weren't per se destroying the zombies, we held them off pretty easily without much intervention needed. But because I was impatient, I used the Cherry Bomb when it wasn't necessary to beat the level faster, and I enraged all the Buckethead Zombies, which made me lose all my defenses in lane 3. Not very smart. But despite that, I still made it to the final wave. I just needed to kill the Flag Zombie to beat the level, and that's the level done. Alright, now for real, this time I've learned my lesson. I'm not using Cherry Bomb no more. If it works, don't touch it. Just let the Doomflowers do their thing for the final wave, and now we're actually done with the last Choose Your Seeds level in daytime. Now the last level of World 1, 110. It's probably the easiest level so far because not only do we start with pre-planted plants, we also have practically infinite Cherry Bombs from the conveyor belt. So it's pretty much impossible to lose as long as your eyes and brain work. Not much to see here, so I'll just skip to the end of the level, and that's World 1 completed. And now it's nighttime, sun no longer falls from the sky, and you know what's coming up next. It's time for Puff Shrooms, which now interestingly shrink every 15 seconds. The catch is that the smaller it is, the faster it shoots, and it spores bypass shield objects if the Puff Shroom is shrunk twice or more. However, those shrunk twice or more can be instantly trampled by any zombie, but then leave behind an aura that slows them down. But I'm sure you're dying to know what the newspaper zombie holding the Death Note does. What's different about the newspaper zombie, you ask?
お前はもう死んでいる。
This is the Doomspaper Zombie, which quite literally spells doom by casting spells and damaging all plants in its lane, turning any plant it kills into a gravestone. Additionally, it is immune to being eaten by Chomper. When its newspaper breaks, it damages all plants around itself, moves 7 times faster, and does 12 times more damage than the vanilla newspaper zombie. I wish I were making up these numbers. But how did it kill us instantly previously then? Well, it's actually a buff all newspaper zombies have. They now teleport to the first plant in front of themselves when their newspaper gets destroyed. So, how much health does Doomspaper Zombie have? Well, just a casual 10 times more health than a vanilla newspaper zombie. To put that into perspective, that's more than a Gargantuar, and it survives 3 explosives. Might as well forget about killing this using attacking plants. It's not entirely impossible to stop them though. Since its spell does percentage-based damage, it can't kill our Puff Shrooms instantly. Plus, we can use puff shrooms that are shrunk twice or more to bypass the Doomspaper and damage the zombie directly, weakening it enough for a potato mine to finish the job. But relying on puff shroom might as well be suicidal, since it only takes one foreign zombie to ruin our entire plan. So, I then came up with this setup, which filters out the basic zombies of snow peas, allowing chompers to clean up the newspaper zombies when they teleport forward. Now, I'm not even sure why I tried this, considering Doomspaper zombies don't get eaten by chompers. I basically had to throw away everything I had at just one of them. Even with Cherry Bomb, it only died after I sacrificed several chump blockers to stall for time. And throw in just one more newspaper zombie into the mix, and we've got ourselves an undefendable position. Funny thing is that it was actually a different newspaper zombie behind it that teleported into our house that killed us. I then tried subbing in Repeater for Chomper, but that made things even worse because even in regular newspaper zombies have a ton of health, about as much as a football zombie in vanilla, so not using instant kills against them is just a death wish. And that's the problem with any setup without chompers. We simply lose too much of our defense to regular newspaper zombies, and when Doomspaper zombies come, they deal the final blow and finish us off. But when I tried the level with only chompers and instant kills, I was consistently losing to just basic zombies by the final wave because of how many there were, and we simply get overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. Even Doomflowers can't save us, as just the regular newspaper zombies need 4 Doomsuns to be killed, and we simply get overwhelmed too quickly to make any counterplay. It seems like this level might just be impossible after all. But then, I thought of something. I can actually avoid the newspaper zombies from being enraged if I can somehow synchronize the Doomflowers to produce enough Doomsuns at the same time. And after many test runs, I refined and defined this method to actually pull this off in game. The plan being to plant a sunflower 25 seconds apart from each other to synchronize when they produce sun. And how am I going to count 25 seconds? Well, I had the stopwatch app pulled up on my phone to time things properly, and as you can see, planting my third sunflower on the 25th second synced it up with the first sunflower to produce sun at the same time. But it's not over yet, since I still needed a lot more sunflowers to pull this off, so I defended the early game with as few plants as possible, ensuring that we saw every wave to get as many sunflowers as possible. I got pretty lucky with not too many Doomspaper zombies spawning early on, and I was able to sync up 6 sunflowers together. After that, I converted those 6 sunflowers to Doomflowers to see for myself whether this would finally work, and to my surprise, it actually did. All the newspaper zombies died at the same time without ever having a chance to destroy our defense. Just making sure I would be safe, I placed my potato mines and walnuts to deal with the several Doomspaper zombies that did come, and they were easy work since there weren't like 10 other things we had to deal with. And somehow, this strategy where I use a stopwatch to time when to plant every sunflower actually ends up beating the level, without even using any lawnmowers. Just wow. Now the stopwatch seems kind of overpowered, but Conehead Pea Shooter zombies are why we can't just do the same thing again next level. We're actually forced to use Sunshroom for this level since sunflowers get hit by Zombatini peas, and we'll need the Sunshroom for its immunity to Zombatini peas because my god, the Pea Shooter zombies got a disgusting buff that makes them hit multiple lanes at once. But besides that, the Sunshroom also got a massive rework in this mod, storing the sun it produces in its body, and also growing faster with fewer Sunshrooms in its lane. More interestingly are the Enraged Sunshrooms, which are basically mini Doomflowers that only affect a small area around themselves, but produce sun instead of losing a sun. The downside is that they lose health every time they do that, so it's not reliable for long-term defense. But speaking of long-term defense, good luck to anyone trying to get up a permanent defense against Conehead Pea Shooter zombies. How is anyone able to make any progress against this nonsense? Even by the first flag, I still only had 2 repeaters and puff shrooms. And I was actually able to get around that because I have Potato Mine and Cherry Bomb as part of my loadout. Since all the zombies are slow moving in this level, I could just spam all my repeaters, puff shrooms, walnuts, and sunshrooms into the top 2 lanes, while I simply alternated between Potato Mine and Cherry Bomb to defend the bottom 3 lanes. This ridiculously scuffed defense makes no sense in any other scenario, and this actually works thanks to the Enraged Sunshrooms providing the little bit of splash damage we need. So, despite it looking extremely hard at first, I was able to beat the level on my first try. We finally unlocked the 7th slot at the start of 2-3, which will be pretty useful against the Screen Door Zombie and a Riot Shield Zombie. My god. Screen Door Zombie and its variants can now spawn in the first wave, and we can immediately see that the Riot Shield Zombie is 100% immune to all explosives. Yeah, it survives a whole ass bomb in its face but dies to a small mushroom that shoots tiny spores. Makes sense to me. What makes even less sense are the Fume Shrooms variants. The Icy Fume Shroom seems pretty overpowered, slowing down 3 lanes of zombies at once, and also freezing those that don't have any headwear, but its fumes do not pierce through riot shields and do low damage. And coming up next are the screen door zombies. Alright, I'm sorry, I'll stop saying that. It's basically just like how a shield zombie works in PvZ 2, blocking off stray projectiles like icicles from hitting zombies behind it. But icy fume shrooms will pierce through the shield, which ends up making them really easy to kill most of the time. Fume shroom also has another variant, the toxic shroom, which poisons zombies that it hits, but has a more limited range of only 4 columns. Now, technically toxic shrooms can pierce through riot shields, but the riot shield prevents the zombie from taking any poison damage, so in practice, toxic shrooms are useless against it. Not only that, the riot shield itself has 2000 health and stops icicles from splitting, so they're incredibly tanky when we don't have a proper counter. They can't even get eaten by chompers. I suppose the modder added this zombie just to make sure we can't spam instant kills after they saw how much we used them in the TD mod. But you won't have to wait for puff shrooms to shrink every time to counter them. The default fume shroom pierces through the riot shield, which I found out a bit late, but the level was pretty easy, so it didn't matter. But by now, you must have noticed that there are no naturally spawning gravestones. So what does Gravebuster do? Well, how it works is actually too complicated to explain in detail, but all you need to know is that it summons a few snow peas that do some damage, slow zombies down, and generates some sun and recharges our seed packets faster. Now, I went with snow peas and fume shrooms again since they did well in the last level. However, this level is twice as long as well, so there are more toxic cone heads. All the splash damage I had meant I was killing them too quickly, and I ended up killing my own defense instead. Whoops. So I tried green shadows instead of snow peas afterwards to reduce our damage output while having the stalling we need against pole vaulters, but even then, our fume shrooms were still wrecking the toxic cone heads too quickly somehow, and I killed my own defense again. And after a bit more trial and error, I removed the toxic shrooms from the lineup and replaced them with regular repeaters. That was enough to reduce our damage output enough to not die to the toxic cone heads, but still gave us enough to survive against the pole vaulters. Balancing my defense to play around toxic cone heads is not very interesting, but very soon, we will unlock a plant that solves that problem. Before that, we have to get through the probably impossible new and not improved version of Whack-A-Zombie. Even basic zombies require 3 whacks to kill now, and even the spawn rate in this level is 12 times higher. So, just imagine how easy this level is when we have to contend with newspaper zombies that take 10 whacks to kill and riot shield zombies that take 20 whacks to kill. Yeah, I mean, good luck trying to do this on a mouse instead of a touchscreen, and I think it's pretty fair to say that I'm not skilled enough at the art of clicking to beat this since the game is spawning a zombie from every gravestone at once. And I didn't want to be stuck here just practicing my clicking skills, so I just got an auto clicker to help me out and get past this level and return to normal PvZ. We unlocked the 8th slot at Hypnoshroom for beating 2-5, but I'll explain what it does later, because I have to deal with the football zombie that now literally throws footballs at us first. I mean, that is absolutely diabolical to make it actually attack with footballs, so we'll need plenty of walnuts to prevent those footballs from hitting our other plants. Now, the new Hypnoshroom. They're not even an instant kill anymore, as they now fire laser beams that attack an entire lane of zombies at once, and it actually does quite good damage, more than Fume Shroom does in this mod. And my god, I've been anticipating unlocking Hypnoshroom because they counter toxic cone heads, since their laser beams destroy poison bottles. But we've got bigger fish to fry with the new Giga Football Zombie variant, which charges and pushes zombies forward while significantly damaging the plant it charges at. These guys have twice the health of a regular football zombie, so even a cherry bomb won't kill them, and they will keep charging once every 3 seconds. I got very unlucky with the zombie spawn since another Giga Football Zombie in the wave after went to the bottom lane as well, and that was the end of that. Oh, but if you thought Giga Football Zombies are pretty stupid already, then you're not ready for the Swordmaster Zombies that move even faster than them. It does 10 times the damage of a regular football zombie, becoming enraged for 2 seconds every 6 seconds. Even if you plant a walnut to halt it in place, it gets rid of the walnut in like 5 seconds, and on top of that, clogging with chump blockers like Sunshrooms makes the situation even worse, since they teleport forward if they kill a plant while enraged. Like, what the heck is even going on anymore? Now, you may think Doomflowers would just easily beat every level on their own now that we have Hypnoshroom, but there's a new problem with this. You see, regular sunflowers usually produce sun every 25 seconds, but that has been changed for all nighttime levels after 2-1, to once every 50 seconds instead. Which, yeah, that's way too slow to be reliable against the Swordmaster zombies that come in and wreck your entire defense in like 10 seconds. So much for Hypnoshroom deleting the poison bottles when we can't even use Doomflowers as our damage anymore. And since football zombies can literally spawn the first wave, finding an efficient solution that worked against them in the early game but also survived long enough was seemingly impossible. Puff Shrimps would help us early on, but would completely fall off when the stronger variants came, and our defense would just crumble. We can't even use Chompers to instant kill them, since Chompers can't kill football zombies. Just the sheer quantity of them makes it absolutely ridiculous, since Walnut just doesn't recharge fast enough. That's not to mention we also have to contend with buckethead zombies in this level, and to build up any meaningful defense is simply impossible. Now it may seem we're screwed, but see, spamming the hell out of snow peas and repeaters would usually be terrible, since we would just end up dying to the toxic coneheads. But you know what solves that problem? Well, that's why Hypnoshroom is the holy grail. Negating the effects of toxic coneheads means I can use as many DPS plants as I want, and on top of that, I don't need to spend a lot of sun on just negating the poison bottles. It basically made us go from completely losing to completely winning. And it's fair to say that it's the best plant in the entire mod just for this utility, and just so you see how useful it is in the later levels. But now, we just unlocked the second best plant in the game. Now, how on earth is Scaradishroom supposed to be the second best plant if it only costs us 50 sun? Well, it now fires air blasts that not only push back zombies, but also do massive damage and pierce through them. Yes, it's two-shotting basic zombies, for only 50 sun. But the most absurd part of it is that if a zombie gets close to it, it puts up an infinite-like force field that has infinite health for 80 seconds, then starts shooting out air blasts in free lanes instead. The plant also takes 90% less damage from football zombies. Yeah, maybe this should cost 500 sun and not 50 for such overpowered abilities. The only weakness it even has is that its force field doesn't protect itself, but that's barely a problem since we can just stack multiple Scaradishrooms in the same lane to prevent anything from even touching it. So I don't think anyone would be surprised by the fact that I beat the level on my first try. I mean, it wasn't even close to a challenge, since having a new infinite health force field every 18 seconds for only 50 sun, yeah, that's pretty stupid. Now I thought we were just gonna cruise through the rest of the game with Scaradishroom, but I wasn't even close to prepared against the dancing zombies of this mod. No, they're not just moving 3 times faster and spawn backup dancers that fire literal shockwaves at our plants. They even block our vision temporarily. Oh, and they also do splash damage around themselves, so it wrecked 4 lanes of plants in 10 seconds. But it gets worse with the RGB dancing zombie variant, which spawns RGB backup dancers that instantly explode whatever is in front of them with a red laser. And the dancing zombie spawns a poison bottle every 5 seconds. And the RGB backup dancers switch between RGB laser beams. The green one will poison our plants and the blue one will slow down our plants. That's if any plants are still alive for them to kill if it didn't get obliterated already. Perfectly balanced game. Now obviously, I had to try the infinite HP force field, but of course, the modder already thought of that and made the RGB laser beams ignore it, so they insta-explode our Scaradishrooms just like any other plant. Now what? Not even Doomflowers would do anything since there's only a 2-second window for our Doomsuns to be effective. As soon as the RGB backup dancers spawn, the entire defense gets cooked within an instant, and the next thing you know, the next wave is already here with even more RGB dancing zombies just in case there's still something alive. The only viable counter is to instant kill all the RGB dancing zombies before they summon the backup dancers. I would count Ice Shroom as an instant kill since they now heavily damage zombies with icicles, which is enough to kill them sometimes. But since the only instant kill that I've unlocked are Ice Shroom and Cherry Bomb, I can't possibly win if just more than 2 RGB dancing zombies spawn. And since RGB backup dancers have even more health than a football zombie, they're basically impossible to kill. Between the Zombotany Peas, the RGB laser beams, the poison bottles, and the flag zombie, we're cooked through and through to medium rare perfection. There's no way to arrange and position the plants to avoid them from getting killed. You can choose to get exploded by the laser beams or die in 1 second to the Conehead Pea Shooter zombies. Mind you, this is not even the last level or the second to the last level of the world, so I was pretty lost as to what I could do to beat this level. Nothing I tried even came close to working, and it just seemed like countering the dancing zombies was impossible without instant kills. But thank God I was live streaming, because I had viewers who were able to give me ideas on how to beat this level. So KL in the 2-dimensional Hyper Cuboid, Scaradishroom plus Walnut at the top, all the way at the front. It dies quickly, but allows you to deal with the previous wave, both by blocking Peas, but by also triggering the wave the dancing's early. I can see it. So, you're saying we're gonna use the force field from the Scaradishroom just to block off the zombies. They can deal with 2 waves at once, leave the other lanes empty, and we're just gonna potato mine them down. So basically, we don't even care about like anything else. We just go all in on Scaradishroom, and we go chompers. I don't know, because of you can like clear the hordes in lane 1. I guess that's gonna be used to kill the things in lane 1. Hold on, this guy might be cooking here. I don't know how I didn't think of this, but I don't have to kill the zombies if I just infinite stall them with Scaradishroom, and I just need to defend its lane with 1 Walnut. Just one problem with that is that I went into this without actually considering how to kill the zombies afterwards, so when the force field expired, I just wasted most of my instant kills against the regular zombies when I could have just kept stalling everything with more Scaradishrooms towards the back, using up all my counters against the dancing zombies. Yeah, in hindsight, it's almost as if I was trying to lose intentionally. So I played it a bit smarter than Nick's attempt, stacking up potato mines in the back, and no, I didn't forget I could just place my Scaredy Shroom a column further back this time. I pretty much corrected every mistake I made, stopped the zombies from reaching the potato mines I had in the back, and avoided wasting my chompers on random zombies, and instead utilized enraged sun shrooms. So when the RGB dancing zombies arrived, I was able to deal with them and actually survive, making it to the first flag, which is a massive improvement from my first run. The only misplay I made in this entire run was just me being slow on my Ice Shroom on the first flag, so I ended up wasting a potato mine against brown coat zombies. And I was still looking pretty solid with all my lawnmowers. But that potato mine in lane 4, which doesn't seem to matter at all, would ultimately change everything for me. That is because by the final wave, I needed just one more potato mine in lane 4 to kill the dancing zombies there. Now, I could have done nothing here and just hoped my cherry bomb would recharge in time to deal with lane 4, but looking at the cooldown, that was probably too slow. And so, I placed the chomper in lane 4, which inadvertently gave the RGB backup dancers a target to explode up, killing my potato mine in lane 3. Yeah, this could have been avoided if I had just one more potato mine. So, you can just imagine how much of a setback that was for me. Not only did I lose, but I was frustrated and upset at myself. And after that, I just wasn't playing as well as I could have. However, what's really ironic about it all is that this would ultimately help me win later on. I was so upset about it all that I somehow ended up mistiming my cherry bomb, and it got instantly destroyed by Zombatini Peas. But that mistake I made because I was frustrated, it coincidentally let my lawnmowers activate at just the right time on the final wave, killing all the dancing zombies before they spawn anything, and isolating the flag zombie from the rest of the crowd. It allowed me to take it down with a chomper and walnut, leaving us with just brown coat zombies in 3 lanes that the lawnmowers missed at the end. Yeah, I won because the zombies were so strong that they managed to correct my misplay. Now that is definitely the most nonsensical way I've ever beaten a level. Now that was just the first level of dancers, so you can probably guess how bad it'll get now there's even more stuff mixed in. I mean, I don't even need to explain just how bad this can get. RGB dancing zombies rolling right in, Doomshroom doesn't even survive their splash attack, sprinkle a dose of Giga Football zombies pushing RGB backup dancers forward, and combine it with several poison bottles that kill everything we have remaining, it's a pretty good recipe for brains, I would say. But ironically, the very zombie that killed me in my first run is the reason why I ended up beating the level in just 2 tries. The fact that there were football and screen door zombies meant there were fewer dancing zombies. And just by chance, there were only 2 RGB dancing zombies throughout the entire level. And they just so happened to spawn in the last 2 waves, so I was able to cheese them with lawnmowers. Hey, I literally played this live, so I didn't cheat at all. I guess that saves me quite a lot of time, so thank you RNGesus for once. Now, the final level of World 2, which is also the last level of Dancing Zombies. And it also happens to be the easiest level in the mod because of Doomshroom, which you're seeing this correctly, poisons everything that its initial blast doesn't hit with deadly radioactive fallout permanently. And since the conveyor belt also gives Ice Shrooms, I can just alternate between Ice Shroom and Doomshroom to pretty much beat the entire level. And that now means we have now completed World 2 of the world's hardest PvZ mod. And boy, World 3 is even crazier than this. Welcome to World 3, which is the pool stage, and even more new zombies await us here. But hold on, we can use Hypnoshroom during daytime? That is because it no longer sleeps in the day, unlike other mushroom plants like Ice Shroom. But Ice Shroom is actually better while asleep, since it has 114,000 HP, which is about as much health as 3 Zombots combined. So I'll be using it as a wall plant against the pea shooter zombies and the new walnut zombies. These guys not only have a bunch of health, but they also shoot piles of dirt at our plants. I was initially pretty confused about what it did. Later, I found out that it just removes incoming projectiles and does no damage. But since Hypnoshroom's laser beams don't count as projectiles, I can beat the level by just spamming Doomflowers and have Hypnoshroom incinerate all the poison bottles. Yeah, this is way more than overkill, and especially more powerful now that Doomflowers are back to producing once every 25 seconds in daytime. With practically indestructible wall plants, we're off to an easy start in World 3. But you can see again just how ridiculous Ice Shroom is in daytime next level. With only Buckethead, Football, and Walnut zombies in 3-2, nothing will ever pass through the practically indestructible Ice Shrooms. Hypno Shrooms weren't even necessary since there were no Kona zombies on this level. Yeah, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have allowed myself to use this cheese strategy to keep things interesting. And after 2 easy levels thanks to Ice Shrooms, I severely underestimated the potential of Snorkel zombies in 3-3. This level is the first where we can use the Free Peter, and it's actually pretty insane as it now shoots Free Peas in 3 lanes simultaneously, and also shoots Big Peas. That's close to a quadruple buff in damage from Vanilla. But that's not going to matter soon since Snorkel Zombies now spawn as early as the 5th wave, and I had nothing prepared against them. They move 10 times faster, and what even is that bite mark? It ignored the walnut and went straight for the Free Peter? As you can see, they don't have that much health, but now ignore the first plant in its lane and target a second one instead. What's really bad is that if they kill the marked plant, all Snorkel Zombies in the lane become enraged, moving faster, doing more damage, and gaining health regeneration. They become practically impossible to kill because they just one-shot any plant in their way like butter, and on top of that, they move so quickly that not even a lawnmower can damage them. Yeah, not so easy with Ice Shroom now, is it? So, if one column of wall plants wasn't enough, I thought building an extra column would do the trick. Still, it didn't take long for me to find out Snorkel Zombies just retarget onto the next plant down the lane if they're idle for too long. And unfortunately, they targeted the Free Peter in the front, so once that died, there was no way I could have stopped the Snorkel Zombies. Seems like we need to restructure our defense again. Third time's the charm, right? This time, I have choppers to insta-kill the Snorkels reliably and prevent them from retargeting onto our attacking plants. But that only works for so long, since the game spawns a lot of Snorkel Zombies every wave. So much so that the chopper is already out of capacity after just 3 waves, which makes it a horrible time to find out that the bite mark is not only a visual indicator, it also makes Snorkel Zombies inflict a one-time percentage-based damage to the plant, so the walnut with half HP just evaporated. Now all the Snorkel Zombies are enraged again. Like, are you serious of how many abilities this zombie has? And it doesn't even die to lawnmowers. Like, you gotta be kidding me. The Snorkel Zombies spawn so early on, with my current sun production, it's impossible to build a defense that can stop them. Even Doomflowers are just super unreliable if we can only afford a few of them, and that's not even gonna be enough to stop the Snorkel Zombies, so I'm gonna need to find a way to just get more stuff early on. So I did just that in my next run. I locked in, eliminated inefficiencies, and optimized the early game. I used optimal Gravebuster timings to maximize its cooldown reduction value. I spammed lily pads off cooldown so I could get my wall plants set up as early as possible. Sunflowers in the water as well to maximize our adjacency bonuses from the initial group of sunflowers, and using only Potato Mine and Cherry Bomb as defense to stall the waves as much as possible. All of these small things may not do much on their own, but the many marginal differences all add up over time, allowing me to get enough Doomflowers just in time, and I finally had enough to stop the Snorkel Zombies from destroying us. The lesson is that the small things may not be very impactful, however, by staying consistent, those efforts ultimately add up, and we can achieve our goals. Very nice win. But it ain't over just yet with Snorkel Zombies. Now there are also several other threats coming alongside them in Free 4. Now I was planning on just using instant kills as defense to keep stalling the waves like last level, but the really big problem is the Riot Shield Zombies, which, you know, they're immune to instant kills, so that plan isn't going to work. But thankfully, there aren't Conan Zombies this level, meaning Free Peter's high single target DPS can clutch up for us. But you already know that these guys also have insanely high health, so I had to spend even more stun just to protect the Free Peter. By this point, I'd already spent so much on my wall plants and the ground lanes, so this is not looking great against Snorkel Zombies. Oh yeah, this is the Inso Free Peter, but it's pretty bad, so I'm not going to be using it pretty much ever. But remember what I said, a greater variety of zombies means each type spawns less often. Because of that, there were only 1 or 2 Snorkel Zombies every wave before the first flag, which was no problem for our Free Peters. Sometimes they didn't even live long enough to jump into the water, and ironically, the existence of football zombies made the level easier to beat again. And by the first flag, we had so many Free Peters, we almost maxed out all our adjacency bonuses on them. We do so much damage that football zombies don't even make it to the water before dying. Yeah, if you didn't notice already, all zombies can now spawn in the water lane, but it doesn't really even matter by this point since we have so much damage output, and we've basically already won because we have the indestructible Ice Shrooms blocking the way, and Doomflowers will clean up anything that remains if that's even necessary. And surprisingly, the first free flag level of the game wasn't that challenging, and I beat it on my first try. Now we have the shop unlocked. As usual, I hacked in a bunch of coins to save time grinding for shop upgrades, but lo and behold, there's nothing to buy from the shop except pool cleaners, as everything else has been removed, even the seed slot upgrades. So we only have 8 slots for the rest of the game. And you can see the modder very funnily made the raid cost exactly 10 coins more than what we have at any time, so I guess we're done with the shop then. Now, Free 5 is another minigame level. The gimmick this time is that all zombies are now small and have 4 times less health, but there are also 4 times more zombies. This is easily the most brutal conveyor belt level so far due to the sheer number of zombies, and we're entirely at the mercy of RNGesus for whether we can counter the zombies early on or not. If we don't get enough Hypno Shrooms, we just completely lose against Toxic Coneheads because there's no way to counter 4 times more poison bottles by sacrificing plants. If we don't get enough walnuts, it's completely cooked against football zombies and Snorkel zombies for pretty obvious reasons. That's conveyor belt levels for ya, just complete RNG. I was stuck here for like 15 minutes just retrying the level and trying to get through the early game. It basically just comes down to how lucky we are because there's really no strategy that can allow us to win with bad RNG against Toxic Conets or Snorkel Zombies. Eventually, I played the level enough to get a lucky run. The key was just getting enough walnuts early on to block off the football zombies so that I could set up my Hypnoshroom safely. And that once we have the walnut set up, it's pretty much just GG's as we can just get up our Free Peters for damage and Cherry Bomb everything to the Ice Age. And the rest of the level is pretty easy from that point forth, so not much to say, and we're moving forward to level 3-6. Now, as you may know, the Zamboni first appears in 3-6, but there's also a new peculiar looking ninja zombie. We won't have to wait for long to see what the Zambonis do, as they now spawn as early as the 5th wave, like Snorkel Zombies do. It's pretty much unchanged other than its new ability to now slow down any plant that is in front of it, so not too hard to counter with instant kills. But the ninja zombies, they pack a punch. They seem to just be throwing shurikens, but if you let a plant get too low in health, they teleport forward and assassinate the plant and start insta-killing everything in their way. Each of them has 1,000 health, and it's practically impossible to stop if you let them get that far, since lawnmowers won't kill them. And we lost just like that. My god, what the hell. That might seem impossible to counter at first, but it's actually as simple as just placing wall plants in the front. They won't teleport forward to assassinate anything if the plant they're hitting with the shurikens has more than 20% of its health remaining. So it's pretty easy to tell when to replace the walnuts to prevent that from happening. And once we set up our Free Peters and wall plants, the ninja zombies and Zambonis will pretty much not be a problem at all. But you didn't think it was that simple, right? Incoming in the bottom lane is the boss Zamboni, with silver tires and a crow on the cover of its truck. This beast boasts 13,000 health, calls in airstrikes to kill our plants, which do splash damage, and the boss Zamboni also passively slows down plants in a 5-column free row area around itself. On top of that, it is immune to Spikeweed, and it also summons a small Zamboni behind itself every 10 seconds. And when it does eventually die, the crow on the truck will fly off and make the first plant in front bleed. That is an absolutely crazy zombie, so thank god there can't be more than one of them on the lawn at any time, and it only spawns once every 4 waves at most, so the final wave didn't take forever to win. Now that we have Spikeweed, the zombies are more dead than ever. Its biggest problem in vanilla was us having to repair our wall plants, but that's a non-issue with Ice Shroom since it's basically indestructible, so this combo essentially kills every zombie in a lane for just 200 sun. It also got a nice double attack speed buff from vanilla, and now also receives a temporary attack speed and damage buff whenever a zombie dies on it. It literally killed the walnut zombie on its own. That's pretty insane. This level also brings back both the Snorkel Zombies and Zambonis, but again, more varieties of zombies, meaning fewer Snorkel Zombies, so we don't need as much defense to take care of them early on again. And since this level doesn't have Conet zombies, it's ironically easier than the last level despite being twice as long, since just Doomflowers and Spikeweed spam with wall plants will beat about 99.9% of the zombies. The Free Peters were pretty much cosmetic apart from killing off boss Zamboni, since anything else would just die to our splash anyways, and that's basically their entire purpose of existing in this defense. Anyways, another easy level out of the way, and we get Torchwood. Torchwood has been completely reworked to function as a close-range attacker, dealing extremely high burning damage to zombies that are in close proximity. And when we hold left click, it spits out flames in its lane, but that extinguishes it for the next 15 seconds. I mean, is it even worth using if we can't even use them to buff our Free Peters? Honestly, probably not if you just compare this to Spikeweed, which would bypass shields when Torchwood doesn't. Okay, we've seen pole vaulters already. Dolphin Riders can't be worse, right? Well, it jumps one time, then it jumps a second time, and it jumps a third time. Straight to the back column, fair and balanced, and it does impact damage, so whatever it lands on literally dies. Like, are you serious, bro? How can I even kill 10 Dolphin Riders that just literally go straight to the backmost column? At least the pool cleaners killed them, but I've used both of them already, so what can I even do now? This monstrosity is absolutely unstoppable without making them jump all 3 times. Leave some tiles empty, and it's gonna go from coast to coast in 8 seconds. I couldn't even convert to Doomflowers quickly enough because I was dead already. So we're gonna need a completely new strategy to beat that. First, I'm using Spikeweed instead of Free Peter, which is cheaper and more effective against the Riot Shield zombies. But what's even my plan to kill any of these zombies in the water lanes then? Well, Doomflowers are how. I'm going to try and get as many Doomflowers as possible, and it's gonna be difficult to do this compared to Snorkel zombies because we can't stall the Dolphin Riders at all. And when the first Dolphin Rider hits, you can immediately tell we need more Doomflowers because we cannot let them reach our sun production or else their landing impact damage will kill everything. In fact, it's already getting to the last column, so I quickly converted 4 more Sunflowers to Doomflowers to help out. But then that meant I didn't have enough sun producers to sustain the Doomflowers. I'm defending for now, but losing sun over time, and that's really bad. And I literally ran out of sun right after the wave before the final wave, and I managed to get the blood flowers to get the last bit of sun we needed to activate our doom suns to kill off the final wave. That is yet another example of why Hypno Shroom's countering Toxic Coconuts is so essential, because this level would be impossible otherwise. Time for the penultimate level of the world, which brings back almost every zombie we've seen so far. Now that we have Tall Nut, we can return to using Free Peters, as Tall Nuts will stop the dolphins in the water. Now, you probably already noticed the Tall Nuts spewing out some green stuff. That's their new healing ability, which recovers 25% of their health every 10 seconds. Pretty overpowered, honestly. But you know what doesn't heal up? Here comes. No! I forgot to replant the wall plant. Oh my god, one shot to. Okay. Okay, I don't even know what's going on anymore. Please kill that. God, bro. So, while it seems nice to plant the Tall Nuts in the water immediately, that makes us vulnerable against ninja zombies because of the early football zombies. So the counterintuitive play of using our stronger wall plants on the ground lanes first is necessary to pass the early game. And yes, doing this means that we won't have Tall Nuts to fully set up in the water before Dolphin Riders come on the first flag. And it seems like I'm just completely screwed against Dolphin Riders in lane 3 then, but we're actually completely fine, since I could just clog the back column with a Walnut. That buys us enough time to get our Tall Nut halfway past the first flag, and since I'm getting Doom Flowers later anyways for splash damage, they'll clean up the Dolphin Riders in the back, so that's not a problem for us anymore. So, it wasn't too hard to set up the defense we need to beat this level, and from this point forth, it's pretty smooth sailing. So, safe to say that we've beaten Free 9. But before winning, I accidentally discovered the Evolve Squash, so might as well show it off before we win. The Evo Squash is unlocked by getting 2 Troll Squashes in the same game. Then, Evo Squash will instead squash in a 3x free area and deal twice as much damage. Gotta love the mod developer for adding these little niche things for us to find by chance. And anyways, that about wraps up the entirety of what World 3 has to offer. Definitely the most interesting world, but not the hardest by any metric. So we still have 310 remaining, but that's just another easy conveyor belt level similar to 110 and 210. And unfortunately, that will be the end of the RT mod, the official sequel to Total Death Edition, as the modder has gone on an indefinite hiatus, leaving the mod unfinished and playable only up to this point. But for now, I'll see you again when I'm live streaming the new version of PvZ Free approximately 12 hours after this video is uploaded. And thanks for watching.